Hello, everyone. This is Philosophy for the People with Stefan Bertram, which is me, and Ben Burgess, who's over there. And Ben, I wanted to start today by asking, is free will a satanic lie?
Well, opinions vary. Um, I lean towards no, but I have, that's a message I've seen in the signs. So, maybe I'm wrong.
Is the Westboro Baptist Church still a going concern?
What's that?
Are they still a going concern?
They are actually still a going concern. So when I think I mean, they don't quite have the hold over the public imagination that they did in the Bush years. Which I think might say more about us than about them. Because if you actually look at it, I mean, I'm not even sure the size of the church is all that different, between then and now.
Right. I mean,
It was
people
always
people say crazier shit than they do all the time on Twitter. I mean, I guess the only thing
yeah,
for
that's
them is they touch grass.
right. That's probably why, right? Because it's like in an era of QAnon, it's like Westboro Baptist, whatever.
They're boring. I did really like I did really like the line that you quoted about God guides the hand of Sunni jihadists to kill American soldiers, which is something quite a lot of people outside of America think. Certainly
Sure.
millions of people. They're just none of them are Christians.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, this is so. I actually did. I mean, we'll get into some of these examples, I'm sure, as we go on. But while I was writing this, I did take a look at their website, whose name I'm reluctant to say it, a family-friendly YouTube channel. And in and I could find like certainly recent, there were a lot, like there are recent press releases, whenever like something terrible happens, that's like,
It's
oh,
good.
God punishing you people.
Which is it's really they are in some ways, they've disappeared from the news because they've become, they're not the edgiest thing out there. But in other ways, they'd be good on Twitter, because there's always someone on Twitter who's like, actually, this bad thing is good.
Right. Yeah. They are just kind of the ultimate version of that. And I will say that they are on Twitter,
Oh,
although
nice.
in a surprisingly marginal way, right? I mean, you'd think that given, again, how much of our collective attention they managed to attract over the decades,
Right. I mean, I'm British, and you heard a lot about them in that period.
yeah, exactly. I mean, there have been, I believe, I'm blanking on the name of the presenter, but there's a guy at the BBC who I think has done 3 trips to Kansas over the decades to talk to them and do these like hour-long documentaries about them.
But so, what is the general topic today? What is the thesis of the essay, and why did you write it?
Yeah. So the essay is called "The Westboro Baptist Solution to the Problem of Evil," and the background of why I wrote it is for anybody who watched the most recent Natalie Wynn ContraPoints video will know that she mentions in that video. It's a little bit of an aside as far as the larger topic, although it ties in. This book called Unfollow by Megan Phelps Roper. And I'd actually seen, I'd never heard of this book when it came out. I'd actually seen it at like a Barnes and Noble in California, I don't know, a month or two ago when it was being displayed. I think because the publisher was probably giving it a new push because Phelps Roper was doing this big podcast about J.K. Rowling, which is what Natalie was responding to in the video. And all of that is its own can of worms, or maybe, Russian nested doll of cans of smaller worms, within cans of larger worms. But so a lot of the video is about the sort of disagreements that Natalie Wynn and the sort of current version of Megan Phelps Roper have now, because Megan has, Wynn's read on Megan at least is that she's become sort of a squishy centrist who thinks that we should all be having this very civilized debate about trans stuff, and Wynn thinks that this sort of underplays the moral urgency of the struggle for trans rights. And Wynn thinks that J.K. Rowling is much worse than Phelps Roper thinks she is. Right? That's the sort of contemporary part. That's not actually really what interested me. Not because it's not interested. It's just not what I'm interested in this context. What sort of caught my attention in that video is when Natalie starts talking about this book Unfollow, because like everybody, I think, who was paying attention to American politics in the Bush years and like early Obama years, um, the Westboro Baptist Church had been on my radar, even though it's a tiny little church. I mean, it's independent church. It's not affiliated with any larger Baptist denomination, which there are lots of those independent Baptist churches. And it's got like, I don't think it's ever really had more than like 100 members. I think it's generally been somewhere in the several dozen range. And it's just that they managed to become, maybe the most hated little church of several dozen people in the world. And don't get me wrong, they definitely earned it fair and square. I mean, they worked hard for all of that hatred over the years and really did their best to invite it. But they are just this fascinating group of weirdos. And Unfollow is the story of Megan growing up. And I should say, despite their current disagreements, Natalie Wynn says in the video, this is a good book. She
Right, because this kind of book
Yeah.
could really suck. It could be really boring and just be like a sob story or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. It's not hard to see actually how it could really suck. But it is actually, I agree. I think it's like a pretty good book. It's like a fascinating little window into what this is like. What I say in the essay is the sort of experience of growing up in and then starting to have doubts about, and eventually leaving probably the most luridly awful, Christian denomination that you could imagine, short of like human sacrifices in the church basement, and part of that's just because the church itself is so fascinatingly strange, and part of it's because she's a good writer, and I think she tells a compelling story. But a big part of it, and this is what gets to the actual thesis of the essay, is that this that they essentially, if you think about what philosophers call the problem of evil, and you think about it in sort of the most like kind of intuitive pre-philosophical terms, you think like, okay, there's an old book by like a liberal rabbi called Why Do Bad Things Happen to Good People? That's you sort of think about that framing. That was like a coffee table kind of bestseller decades ago. Think, okay, why do bad things happen to good people? That's what the problem of evil is about. There are all these different solutions that it's about free will. God has this or that purpose that they solve. And as I was reading it, it occurred to me, man, the Westboro Baptists have a much more sort of inhuman and horrified view about this, but in a strange way, one that I actually think is more intellectually coherent, right, than most of the others.
We should have named the video something like, the Westboro Baptist Church is right about the problem of evil, or just like what the Westboro Baptist Church are right about.
Yeah, the props to the Westboro Baptist Church. Yeah, that's because, like, look, they're not resolving the contradiction in the direction that I would like them to, but they are resolving it, because essentially the Westboro Baptist solution to why do all these horrible things happen to good people is actually they're not horrible things; they're awesome.
Yeah, which is a great solution if you can make it work.
Yeah, I mean it's like to the point that I mean there's a sort of progression here that it started off, and I should say by the way, one of the many bizarre and surprising things you get out of that book is that so Fred Phelps, who is the founder of the church, Gramps to Megan and her sisters, he's their grandfather, but is the person who coined their most memorable slogan, "God hates," British slang term for cigarettes. The is somebody who had a successful career as a lawyer until he was disbarred. He was also like a pastor at the same time the whole time, but like a less strange one. I think just like, I mean, I'm sure he was always a fundamentalist, but not quite what he became. Um, and and actually, this is a really bizarre fact about Fred Phelps. Uh, as a lawyer, he actually specialized in anti-discrimination lawsuits. That this is
No,
not
right.
what you'd expect.
I guess that can make sense, right? Because you can defend people from having to make gay cakes or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, I mean, it was. I mean, it's like Kansas in the decades after the passage of the Civil Rights Act. I mean, he's like defending. He's like doing anti-discrimination lawsuits like on behalf of black people who are racially discriminated against. He's actually got an award for the NAACP, which I don't know how they feel about that now. But then there was a point in like I don't know, late '80s, early '90s, where he basically was walking. So Topeka, Kansas, that's where the Westboro Baptist
Oh,
Church is.
I'm sorry, my microphone's in completely the wrong place.
All good. I'm actually, apologies by the way for the voice sounds off. My microphone has been, something has gone
No,
wrong with me.
I happened because I was like, oh, Ben's mic sounds bad today. And then I was like, wait, I'm fucked up too.
Yeah, it keeps making this weird popping noise, and I haven't figured it out yet. So I'm doing without it. See if this is the lesser evil or not for today. I will fix it by tomorrow night's show. But in any case, so in their town in Kansas, he's late '80s, early '90s. He walks by the car. He walks by the public park, and he sees like some guys coming out of the bushes, and it's obvious that they were getting it out of the bushes, and he's horrified by this. He starts complaining to the city, and it's like gay men having sex in the bushes in the park is like a problem, and they need to do something about it. And the city won't do anything about it because they don't care, about like this like weird old man who keeps yelling at us about this, and then he gets increasingly militant and strident about it, and he leads his church in picketing the park, and he gets more and more obsessed with the gay issue, and the slogans get sort of luridly strange and provocative. I mean, look, just being a fundamentalist church in the 1990s that was super homophobic in Kansas doesn't necessarily make you super unusual, but they were they had this shock value that was different as in how they kind of got the world's attention originally. I mean, they were willing to use the slur. They at a certain point they started doing like ultra shocking things like picketing gay people's funerals. And but then like so far, this would have earned them the sort of fascinated loathing of liberal America, and maybe the embarrassment of conservative America, not wanting to quite be associated with that. But then they kind of decided that they wanted to go for broke and get everybody to hate them, and interpreted the September 11th terrorist attacks as God's judgment against the United States for allowing homosexuality and adultery and etc. Secularism, and which, okay, even that part is not super duper far from things that some, certainly much more mainstream than them evangelicals said at the time. Um, Jerry Falwell famously, he was on Pat Robertson's TV show, The 700 Club, and he said that God had lifted the divine veil of protection, that was, and allowed this terrorist attack to happen because of, a lot of the same things, right? That the abortion and the end of school prayer and etc. But the difference is that, oh, sorry, I can't hear you. That's odd.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
I was just thinking of that drill tweet where he's like, "Oh, there's like a dial with racism on it, and I adjust it as the crowd cheers, but it's God, and he's going up and down the divine veil of protection."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, you'll allow the occasional mall shooting. You'll allow 9/11, right?
Yeah, it's just like kind of like when did he put it over America?
Sure, right? Yeah, but like the difference is that Jerry Falwell and Pat Robertson, who at the time, I think later he tried to claim that like his earpiece had been malfunctioning and he hadn't quite heard what Falwell had said. But
what other context is there for the divine veil? Is it a metaphor?
At the time, he said, "I totally concur," and but he and Falwell both got enough backlash for it. They backed off to a certain extent, and although Falwell apparently just before he died, there's like an interview where he's like, "Yeah, no, that's true. Why are you guys mad about that?" But
the key difference with those guys is like America has been punished and that's bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the Westboro Baptist people are like, well, America's been punished and that's good.
Exactly. That even if they had stuck to their guns more than they did, you can't imagine Falwell and Robertson like, I don't know,
drinking a toast.
Doing clinking some champagne glasses to celebrate God's righteous punishment of the United States. I don't know, waving around a picket sign saying "Pray for more terrorist attacks," which is exactly the kind of thing that the Westboro Baptists do. So in the big shift, like there's a key scene in Unfollow where Fred Phelps has started to take his followers to picket soldiers' funerals who like died in Afghanistan and Iraq, and Megan, who at this point is 18 or 20 or something, is like, wait a second, what? She's talking. A lot of these conversations are with her mom, Shirley Phelps Roper, who, by the way, I think this is really her, actually responded to me on Twitter when I posted the article. She was like, that's what we believe. You use too many words though. You should just say, God punishes people and you have to obey him. But so Shirley, leads the family a little Bible study session to justify why they're picketing soldiers' funerals, and go through the chain of reasoning that well, we can all agree that a dead child is more of a is more as a curse, not a blessing. So therefore, it must be a curse for something. It's been punished. And here's all the reasons. And here's a place where God says He laughs at the sinners who didn't listen in time, and all this stuff. But the effect of this is that they end up like really, as I said, kind of going for broke in terms of getting everybody to hate them by doing, like literally like, picketing military funerals. So they'd be, the loved ones of dead soldier would be, approaching the cemetery gates, and there'd be these lunatics standing there, waving around signs that
I,
says like God loves
I
IEDs.
was kind of surprised that they didn't get their heads kicked in. I mean, maybe they did a little bit, but it wasn't very often.
Not more than it happened, right?
Right.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's like, because like, look, I know there are cases of like people assaulting them or whatever, but it's like how are these people not all just dead?
Yeah,
Right?
military funerals. We've currently got 55 viewers, and we just got $55 from John. So
Nice, nice.
things going up. But the point of this is you kind of go through the normal arguments for. I was distracted by another super chat. The normal arguments for why the problem of evil, how the problem of evil is dealt with, and one of the kind of problematizations of the solution you make is that, well, if all this is God's plan, why are you so sad about it?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I do spend some time going through the standard moves that people make
Guys,
about the problem.
if you want your absolute nonsense to be put on screen and be immortalized in the YouTube video, I will put it up if it's part of a donation.
Nice. Yeah. So like, if you think about standard solutions to the problem of evil, there are a few problems with it. And this is kind of why, like, if you're just sort of sitting there wondering, it's like, okay, granted, these people are sort of interested in watching the car crash kind of way, but like, why are we talking about this? It's true about philosophy. This is why, right? Because there is this, I think, thinking about the Westboro reaction to tragedies and why, all other human beings more or less find that so abhorrent. Then I think actually can lead us to seeing something interesting about more normal solutions to this problem. So think about think about some of the normal solutions to the problem of evil. Like, probably one is to say, well, the reason that an all-powerful and all-loving God, morally perfect, would allow whatever 9/11, the Holocaust, kids dying of starvation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, is because free will is so good that taking it away would, even in order to prevent these things from happening, would be worse than allowing these things to happen. It's like, sure, it's bad that terrorism and rape and murder and genocide and all these things exist, but it would be worse if God stopped them, because that would be taking away our free will. Parenthetically,
he's not even allowed to just let Breivik plant the bombs, but then disable the chemicals inside or whatever.
No. Well, that's the kind of crazy thing about it, right? Now, I should say that the Westboro Baptists wouldn't find this appealing anyway, because as you sort of jokingly alluded to earlier, the Westboro Baptist position is they're like ultra Calvinist. Their position is, and I quote, "Free will is a satanic illusion," but everything that happens is preordained by God. But even if you reject that, right, you do believe in free will. A lot of people will sort of nod along when they hear this, but I think the more you think about it, the less sense this move really makes. Because, as you say, there is this huge gap between, okay, what we're imagining when we think God takes away our free will, that we're all just fleshy robots who can't make any of our own decisions, and that we have no autonomy, and God stopping Anders Breivik from massacring teenagers at a Labour Party youth camp in Norway. And what you're actually talking about is, when you say taking away your free will, is not really what it sounds like. Not that we just become the kind of creatures who are generally incapable of making our own decisions and all of that. What you're really talking about is just that, in at least some cases, stopping humans from carrying out their free decisions, or stopping the effects of those decisions, from doing what they otherwise would have, which is very odd, right? Because in your example, the bomb example, that okay, so if the Oslo police department bomb squad managed to defuse it, that would be fine, right? But if God the Father wills it to be diffused, that's without using humans as its instruments, that's not fine, and that's very confusing, right? Why is the Oslo police
And
department?
it's also rightful for us to then basically entirely take away Breivik's free will.
Yeah, exactly. Like stick him in that. I mean, granted, it's Norway, so they have much more comfortable prison cells, but than we do. But yeah, stick him in a cell so he can't hurt anybody again. Like that's fine too, right? So it's very hard to explain why it's totally fine for the Norwegian state to uh, prevent his crimes if they can, right? Stop him from carrying out his free decision, put him, put him in prison to make sure he doesn't, carry out any similar decisions he might make in the future. But it would not be fine for an all-powerful God to stop him in some ways. And I think that part of the implicit thought often seems to be something like, well, since God could do anything, once God starts messing around with this stuff, then who's to say where it stops? And before you know it, he's just stopping you from doing anything remotely bad, and free will is much less meaningful. Okay, maybe, but if you reflect on your intuitions about human justice, it does seem to me that we think that there is a degree of interference in people carrying out their decisions that's okay for human institutions to do, and a degree that's not, a degree that's too far. That if that it's totally fine, for like nobody justifies the actions of the Uvalde Police Department, which famously, stayed outside for way too long, while there was a school shooter killing children, by saying, oh, but if they took away the school shooter's free will by arresting him, then like that would actually be worse than all those dead kids, because nobody thinks
Right.
that.
I mean, and the god of classical theology is derived from, in large part, these books where God does do this, where he intervenes sometimes, he doesn't intervene in others, he makes warnings and so on, and sometimes he directly makes people do stuff.
And yes, does sometimes directly make people do stuff. And then God, in the Old Testament, God hardens Pharaoh's heart, so he won't let the Israelites go because he has this plan that that this is a necessary step in, which is the kind of thing, by the way, that the Westboro Baptists themselves really like to emphasize. I mean, the way the essay starts is by quoting one of the strangest scenes in the book, where Megan and her sister Becca are both little girls. They're like in the back seat of the car, like young enough that they're like both playing with Barbies on their laps while their mom is talking to them. And I guess it's never too early to tell your kids about predestination and election and pro-reprobation. Um, and so the mom starts talking about how this biblical passage about how but God knew both Jacob and Esau before either of them were born, and even though they were twins, so as biologically similar as two humans could be, and even though they hadn't done anything good or bad yet, God already loved Jacob and hated Esau, and
Which is fucking insane.
yes, right, it is deeply, deeply insane.
And the example that the mother gives seemed to prove the opposite point for me. Whereas,
yeah,
like, you're allowed to love.
Yeah, that it's fine that God, as the heavenly potter, molded Jacob with the intention of making him good and welcoming him into heaven, and molded Esau with the goal of making him bad and having him go to hell. And that when the little girls think this is unfair, it's like, no, you can't question the will of God. She says, well, it'd be like if those Barbies in your lap said, why did you dress me like this? And the implication is that it's not the place of Barbies to question the will of humans, and it's not the place of humans to question the will of God. But you have
But my thought there was like, if the Barbie displeases you, then you can't blame anyone but yourself, right? Because you've you've dressed the Barbie.
it's a good point. I mean, this
Like,
is
if you hate one Barbie and love another, then why did you make them like that?
also fair. Yeah,
Unless
and
you're playing a game where one drowns the other in a bath, or so on and so forth.
yeah, I mean, this is a point that David Hume makes, not with Barbies, but it's essentially the same point. And his in the inquiry concerning human understanding about how if God, you sort of can't really believe both that it's fine for God to reward and punish people for their decisions, and to believe that God makes everything happen. That you kind of or you can't believe that God justly rewards and punishes people for their decisions, and that God makes everything happen. Um, so yeah, I think there's like a real I think when you think about human institutions interfering with people carrying out their free will, fair enough. Then you we think that there's there's a degree of that's fine and a degree of it that's not, and we might not know exactly where the line is drawn, but there are clear cases on both ends of it. That it's fine to stop people from carrying high-powered rifles up to clock towers and massacring people below, right? That's an acceptable thing that the state could stop you from doing. But if you were going to be like, I don't know, I guess this is an example we used in a previous discussion. If you were going to be like arrested for cheating on your girlfriend, or for like not, or for being like I don't know, like a cold and distant son who didn't call his mom enough or something, right? That would be too much, right? That's an excessive amount of interference. So it does seem like we do seem to be capable of making discriminations there about how like that some interference is okay, too much interference is too much. It's very unclear to me why we can't make that in the cosmic case. Even granting that free will is really important. And then there's also, of course, there are all the more familiar problems with this. Like, okay, even if you think that, even if you ignore that very large problem and a bunch of other problems, but let's just skip to this and say that the free will defense against the problem of evil completely explains away suffering of innocence caused by human free will. What about all the suffering of innocence that's not caused by human free will? Somebody, if there's if there's like an earthquake in Port-au-Prince, and X number of people die immediately, and Y number of people are dismembered or like crushed to death under rubble or whatever. That doesn't seem to have anything to do with anybody exercise their free will. That just seems to be God designed the world in such a way that things like that would happen. And so the free will.
The classic Lebesian, Leibniz. How do you say Lebesian? Like,
Oh yeah, Lebesi. It's the.
It sounds wrong, but the
Leibniz.
classic defense there was that we live in the best of all possible worlds, but that seems just so implausible.
Yeah, but this is what. So yeah, Leibniz good on some things, right? Calculus, but a little odd on others. Makes big deal saying, well, God just kind of looks into all the different possible worlds he can actualize. He picked the best one, and might not seem best to us, but we don't have access to all the other ones. This is what Voltaire was making fun of in Candide. Dr. Pangloss keeps saying we live in the best of all possible worlds as increasingly horrible things happen to everybody. And it seems like, it doesn't actually seem like the best of all possible worlds. It seems like, I have suggestions. Like, it seems like there are straightforward ways in which you could design the world differently to have a diminished amount of suffering by innocent people. And so this there is, by the way, a really fun move that Christian philosopher Alvin Plantinga makes, where he says, "Well, look, I'm not saying this is actually true, but there's at least no logical incompatibility between saying that there's a just and all-powerful God, perfectly just and all-powerful God, and that all this stuff happens, because there are scenarios where at most you say it's improbable that if there's a perfectly just God, all this stuff would happen, because after all, it could be, for example, that the free will defense does apply to earthquakes. It could be that demons are using their free will to cause earthquakes, which I have to say is something I always feel like I'm missing the point somehow, like that there's something about this that's eluding me, because I would think the more philosophically interesting question is not, is it consistent that there's a perfectly just and all-powerful God, and that earthquakes would happen in some way or another, but that is that hypothesis consistent with earthquakes happening due to the causal mechanisms that we all know goddamn well cause earthquakes. I mean, you might as well say, look, it's logically possible that there's never really been an earthquake, that this is just an elaborate...
Right, they're made up by anti-flat earthers.
Exactly.
The key point here is that I thought you were going to say another thing, which was like, the other explanation for like why there's earthquakes and so on and various things that we describe as natural evil is that they're part of, well, apart from the soul building theodicy, they're part of some grand plan. But you take issue with this, and this is really where the Westboro Baptist Church comes out ahead. If this is really God's plan, why is everyone so mad about it?
Yeah,
and
so...
it's where the Westboro Baptist Church are really alien, but very interesting in a certain way, because there's a bit in the essay where the daughter sends the mother like some kind of fucked up thing that had happened.
Yeah,
and the mother's like, damn, cool. God's really fucking getting them. And that's like the real attitude, that it's kind of incredible that they managed to inoculate in themselves as actual kind of perspective. But you point out that for everyone else, this isn't shared.
Yeah. I think in that example, so they were like working together in like the family law office, which was also like kind of the Westboro Baptist Church headquarters, essentially, for like doing like PR work and
PR.
Right, whatever. For doing for promoting the visibility of the church and its activities, I suppose. PR is maybe the wrong word, but yeah, and yeah, Megan sees this picture of this like starving child from a famine in Africa, and Rob's like, "Oh, what are you looking at?" She's like, "Oh yeah, send that to me. I want to do a Godsmack post about it." And yeah, that's and like this is the really striking thing, that at a certain point in her story, I mean, this is like really where I got kind of the idea of the essay started to come together in my head when I got to this part, that like a big part of Megan Phelps Roper started to have her doubts about the church's teachings is that she like found herself feeling sad when horrible things happen to people, and, which is just kind of an amazing thing to say. But she just like, yeah, I don't really want to celebrate these things. I feel bad for the people, that like this is itself something that is is hard to square with what they think. So, for example, when I looked at their website when I was writing this, I found a recent press release that referred to both the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, and the mass shooting actually in my hometown in Michigan a couple months ago as blessed acts of divine punishment, and this is again, I mean, this is this a really like grotesque and inhuman way to see the world. But what's interesting to me about it is that there is something about it that is more internally coherent, because all of the problems we've been talking about more standard solutions, sort of get down to this tension between saying, on the one hand, that an all-powerful being, a being who could literally anything that's logically possible, could have just willed into existence, could have done anything, could have made anything happen, right? So, and also a perfectly just being. So, out of all the logically possible things that could possibly happen, the ones that he wills into reality are the best and most morally desirable ones. And there is this real problem with holding in your head at the same time those two claims, right? That a being who could have done anything did this, and everything that he does is the morally best thing to do. And also, I'm really upset that this happened, and I wish we could have prevented it. Like, well, which one is it? I mean, if this is really this, if you're saying the being that always does the morally right thing did this, it's very hard to see how that goes together without at least some dissonance with this is really horrible. I'm really upset that it happened. I really wish that something else could have happened. I really like if if somebody, I mean, if only we'd done X, Y, or Z and it wouldn't have happened. Well, it's like, well, hold on. You're talking about the thing that, like, according to those two premises, is the best thing that possibly could have happened. And so if you're going to try to say, well, this morally perfect being who could have done anything did it, and also it was really bad, then, I mean, putting aside the details of like specific solutions like the free will defense or the soul building defense, which is the one where you say that, the survivors will be like morally and spiritually improved by their experience of this trauma. Putting aside the details of those solutions and the specific things that are wrong with those solutions, there is this much more general issue, which is, okay, if you sort of want to hold on to thinking that bad things are bad, right? They're not actually, it's not that they're going to turn out to be good. So no, they're still bad. But this being who always does the right thing brought them about, then you always have to end up saying, well, okay, it's bad, but it led to something that's more good than bad. So it's still good. It's still good that it happened, even though it's bad in itself. But just structurally, there are a couple of big problems with that move. One of the problems is that it's like, okay, beings of limited power, such as ourselves, constantly have to do somewhat like bring about things that are somewhat undesirable in order to bring about some further end that's more desirable, right? Like you take your kid to the doctor and you give them a shot. The shot hurts. You don't want your child to experience pain, but you'd rather have them experience pain than like get some horrible disease that the shot inoculates them against. That's fine. But a being of unlimited power could, like, if it starts to be really dicey territory to say a being of unlimited power, sure, wouldn't have wanted to do X because X is bad in itself, but had to order to bring about Y. Well, are you really taking the unlimited power bit seriously? Like, why doesn't this being just will that Y? So that's one problem. And then another problem is that there's no it's not really consistent with the normal moral judgments that we make about anybody but God. That we normally don't really accept that like we think there are things that it's not okay to do just because it brings about some greater good. I mean, most of us aren't even okay with pushing the the big guy onto the trolley tracks to save 5 people, or even if we are okay with that, probably not the cutting up the healthy patient to save the 5 people who do transplants in the hospital. And this is just
I wouldn't even know how to do that one.
Yeah, well, yeah. Thank God, because otherwise I'm sure you would. But this is just that on a much, much bigger scale. And look, if there was a human being who, if there was just some human supervillain who had an earthquake machine where they could cause an earthquake in a major urban center, and it turned out that the reason they did it is because they'd figured out that there was some greater good that they thought it would bring about, I don't think we'd be okay with that. I think we would think that they'd done something wrong, even if they were right about the indirect consequences, that actually it's really going to lead to a lot of, spiritual growth by the survivors, and whatever it is, right? Whatever the greater good is.
It leads to Erdogan losing the election.
Yeah, there you go. Even if they had been in a time machine and they knew for a fact that it would bring this about, I think we'd still be morally opposed to what they were doing. So no, there are things you can't do even in order to bring about a greater good. And you could say things like, well, God is actually, it's only wrong for humans to do those things. That the commandments are for us, not for him, or something like that. But at that point, at that point, you've just let go of the idea that the bad things are bad. You just think they're things that God happens to have told us not to do, but you don't really think that they're morally bad in and of themselves. And so I think the West, I think, and again, there's something just, if you think that out of all the, if you're, if John dies when the planes hit the towers, and you can't, and you're a remotely normal person, right? You think, oh God, I really wish John hadn't gone into work that day. I really wish that I'd we were going to go on a vacation. Why couldn't I have had him go on the vacation, before, so he wouldn't have been there that day? But if you simultaneously believe that, look, God could have, an all-powerful being easily could have arranged, even if he'd had to do 9/11 or had to allow 9/11, whatever, we're doing the free will option.
God did 9/11.
Yeah. Well, there's a way that you can, I guess, if you believe in the super predestinarian view, that God, then to put it in the terms of the old-fashioned 9/11 trutherism, God made it happen. That's my hop. But if you believe in the free will defense, then God let it happen. That's lie hop. Let it happen on purpose, made it happen on purpose. But yeah, even if you believe that God either did or allowed 9/11 for a really good reason, look, an all-powerful being could have arranged it so John wasn't there. There must be some reason why this morally perfect, all-powerful being determined that John should be there, that it was important that he in particular die on 9/11. And so if you're, there's a real, I don't know that it's a contradiction exactly, but I think there's at least a tension between the attitudes of somebody who has normal reactions to something like that, but also affirms that this was the morally best possible thing that could have happened, because a being who could literally do anything and always does the morally best possible thing decided that that's what should happen. That's yes, this is the morally perfect outcome out of everything that could have happened. Also, I'm incredibly upset, and I wish we could have prevented it. That's a tricky one. Whereas, the Westboro Baptists, in their grotesque and inhuman way, a lot of their stuff seems to point, it's look, it's at least, give them a point for consistency. If you really believe that the morally perfect judge of everything decided that this is the thing that should happen, then you shouldn't be upset that it happened. You should be, glad that happens. Or again, at least if you're going to go with that premise, although to be clear, as interesting as I find all this, I find it interesting because I think it sheds some clarifying light on the incoherence of a lot of standard approaches to the problem of evil, by comparing it to the Westboro insane but consistent one. But
I've
but
recently been.
I
Go
don't,
on.
like, look, if I had to pick, do I want the world to be populated by internally consistent sociopaths, or by people
Or
who,
confused libs.
yeah, exactly, are kind of confused libs? I'll take the confused libs if those are the only options. But yeah, you were saying.
I've been recently playing an RPG called Wrath of the Righteous, which is about a demonic invasion of a place like Raison's Earth. And there's a lot of people in your party that you go along with, which are really serious believers. But this is a world which doesn't have a problem with evil, because in this world, divine power is shared between different gods who have different interests, which conflict with each other, and it's from here evil comes from. And it always, whenever I'm kind of thinking about this stuff, especially with God, I always think about how uniquely hard it is to defend the God of classical theology. And obviously, there's reasons why the God of people think that the God of classical theology is omnipotent, all knowing, and all loving. But it runs you into so much trouble. Like if you could get rid of any of those things,
Yeah,
it doesn't produce a god who isn't worth worshipping. Rather, like the good gods of this world are definitely worth worshipping. I mean, they're more worth worshipping because they give you magical powers, which is nice. But beyond that, the fact that they kind of give you a good afterlife, if you are a loyal follower of them, that they do their best to make the world a good place. They did their best to make the world a good place when it was being designed, and so on. All these things could be true of like a god which comes from the Bible and so on, but there's no contraforce, and kind of the Christianity, especially in the medieval time, kind of invented this contraposition, right, of Satan, who in the Bible isn't really much of anything, and in the very early Hebrew Bible isn't even a fallen angel. He's like the prosecutor in God's court.
exactly.
And I just find that very interesting. How
Yeah,
uniquely hard to
absolutely.
defend the OO God is.
Yeah, I think a lot of like folk Christianity, uh, it actually does manage to be more consistent because it sort of amounts to like a kind of mild polytheism where Satan is the not as powerful as God but still very powerful counterforce. Um, but like official Christianity, obviously can't avail itself of that. I mean, whatever Satan does, God, created Satan, and God chooses to let Satan do it. God could stop Satan from doing it at any time, um, and so that's not gonna get you very far. And yeah, I mean, I think that you could certainly if you kept all powerful and all knowing, but got rid of all good, then I mean, at that point, it's like, well, the East German secret police were very powerful and very knowledgeable, but be willing to worship them. Uh, the deeply love them, whatever. And but if you do either of the other two, then sure. I mean, you could have this very powerful force, but still has things to block his actions. That is absolutely loving and is on your side, and and whatever. I mean, like for the vast majority of human history, humans did worship gods they didn't think were all powerful.
Right,
Because
and gods which are normally in conflict with other gods.
yeah, exactly, right. That was like part of like most systems of mythology that like sometimes gods would be in conflict with one another,
And
but
then
that
philosophers came along.
screwed everything up. Yeah.
Because that's the interesting thing, right? That the tendency towards monotheism precedes Christianity by several hundred years.
Yeah, and you have so. I mean, it's not at all clear that the earliest Judaism was actually monotheistic. That there are certainly
But
passages.
regardless, right? Judaism before Christianity was not influential at all
Sure, yeah,
outside of
very,
Judea.
yeah, very right, very small minor religion. Um, and again, when even they become actually monotheistic, I think is like a little bit open to historical interpretation. But yeah, I guess, but more interesting examples. I mean, there's like Zoroastrianism, which is not quite monotheistic because there are two, but is certainly a lot closer to monotheism. There's only one good one.
But,
Um,
but I mean, like Plato and Aristotle and also the Stoics were all basically monotheists
yeah, right.
in like the 4th century BC.
That's true. Yeah,
Or at
and
least they wanted to massively reinterpret the gods of Homer.
totally. And I should say, like, I think that the um, like going back to the point about early Judaism, uh, like I've been um, I was thinking about this earlier today because I've been just started teaching this class about Proudhon and Marx, and reading in the introduction to Proudhon's philosophy of poverty. He's got this whole thing about, as religion develops historically, the idea of God becomes more and more abstract. And was thinking about this in that connection because, like, yeah, man, in the like beginning of the book of Genesis, Adam hears the footsteps of God behind him in the Garden of Eden, and okay, since you're used to thinking about God in a certain way, it's very easy now to read that as a poetic metaphor. Not at all clear that it was to the author.
Do
Uh,
you know this Judaic kind of esoteric tradition of like they would describe the length of like the body parts of God?
it's awesome. I think I might have heard of that. I don't remember.
Well,
Uh,
in this situation, they are very, very long. They are very, very big, but finite.
yeah. Uh, so like that's the kind of original like, um, and it's also certainly God originally doesn't seem to be all knowing. He sends the angels down to Sodom to investigate. I've heard some troubling reports about what's going on here. You guys go check it out for me.
Right, that's basically your job in Wrath of the Righteous, the RPG I was mentioning.
Yeah. So all of which is just to say, I mean, it always hits because every once in a while I'll see like a certain kind of theologian, say like, oh, uh, there's the like I believe in like the real original, Jewish or Christian stuff that's not that's not like corrupted by all this like Greek philosophy. It's like, no, you don't. Like, the God you worship has way more to do with Plato than it does with anything that the authors of the Book of Genesis believed.
Right, and thank God for it. They
Yeah,
didn't
yeah,
really
no,
know
for sure.
much.
It's a long step in the right direction. You have a less ridiculous view of the world, and there's a once yeah, I mean, I don't know, there's the to think that you sort of strip away all these sort of tangible properties of God, you're very close to what I would regard as the right answer to this question. But
Have you seen that cartoon of like it's like a reactionary Christian cartoon for the early 20th century, and it's like the modernist steps, and it's like an Anglican priest descending a staircase as he slowly discards like each aspect of God. Like at the top is like about like literaries, literal interpretations of the Bible. Then it goes down and down and down, and you can actually, it's really great because it's 100 years old, and you can see the further steps the Anglican Church has taken since then. Like
yeah.
exactly in keeping with this reactionary cartoon.
Well, I
Um,
actually, yeah, right. It's like, yeah, no, you're correct. You're just, you're making the wrong value judgment about it. But yes, that is that is what happened. I mean, I actually saw Peter Hitchens was upset because was it the coronation? Maybe there's like a traditional prayer the Archbishop of Canterbury is supposed to say. Where I'm probably getting this slightly wrong. I only know about it from Peter Hitchens' tweets. where like you're supposed to, where like the traditional prayer includes a line where you're like praying for like the punishment of sinners or something. And like for the first time, they didn't include that line, and it's like, you know, and of course, you know, Peter Hitchens being Peter Hitchens is like, they're, you know, what is this crap? You know, there's it's a creeping secularism, and to which I would say, yes, that is creeping secularism. That's and faster and more.
Before I ask you what's going to be next week, do you want to hear my solution to the problem of evil?
Please.
I think this perfectly works, and it only requires you to take 2 unpopular premises. Okay, so first off, God is a consequentialist, and thus we all should be consequentialist.
I think you all need to say that to get a coherent solution off the ground.
And second off, annihilationism is true, which is relatively unpopular, but it's the idea for the people listening that souls don't go to hell or like a hell place where they get stabbed by pitchforks or whatever. Rather, their souls are just annihilated. So what happens is we live on Earth and we suffer for some kind of finite period of time. And then we go to heaven where life is pleasant for an infinite length of time. And as we all know, if we subtract 1 billion from infinity, we get infinity. If we subtract 1 Googleplex from infinity, we get infinity. If we subtract 1 Graham's number from infinity, we get infinity. So regardless of how bad things are on Earth, as long as at least 1 soul goes to heaven for eternity, while the rest are annihilated, God, with this system he's created, is not just doing good, but is doing as much good as he could. It's an infinite amount of good.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's as you know, it's as good as, I think that's exactly as plausible as the first premise, but it's consistent.
Yeah, I mean, there are Christian consequentialists out there.
Yeah, that's actually funny. I have to say, I've never run into one, but someone somewhere must have that combination of positions.
Right, because it's not that ridiculous. Like plenty of people are consequentialists.
Yeah. All right. Oh, this is fun. This is what I need to. If anybody knows of any Christian consequentialists, you know, send me a DM or something, and you know, I'm gonna be really curious. But yeah, that is consistent. Yeah. So next week, I'm a little bit on the fence, but the one thing I was thinking about doing, and for this one, I think I would just, for now, I would probably just say the title because I think that's more fun than unpacking what it means. But yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think that yeah, I've had an idea for one for a while now, which would be called "Should Heidegger have read Bertrand Russell?"
Okay, cool. I mean, we could end up just doing this week's essay next week.
We also could do that. Yeah, we didn't get to this week's essay, so which and you know, we shouldn't try to actually talk about it now. But I will just say the essay.
I'll also link it.
The essay for this week, which will be linked in the chat, presumably we'll also make sure it's in the description later, is a reflection essentially on a dialogue that I had on Tuesday with Christine Sipniewicz, who is a philosophy professor in Canada, who she wrote an essay in the Boston Review called, well, it was like a forum, so she wrote a big essay, and then 11 people wrote responses to her. It's called "Is Equal Opportunity Enough?" That's about kind of basically what kind of equality egalitarians should care about. And the Boston Review, and there's also a magazine called The Philosopher, co-sponsored an event where I talked to Christine about her essay for an hour, and we will replay that on GTAA tomorrow night, and you can read the essay now. We might talk about the essay next week. Who knows? We'll see how that shakes out. But I really hope I fix the problem with my microphone by tomorrow night.
So either Hegel, Heidegger mystery box, or J.A. Cohen kind of equality stuff again.
Yeah, sort of a different, like there's an illustration in the essay. So the previous G.A. Cohen thing was essentially about G.A. Cohen's critique of John Rawls. There's a visual, it's a stupid meme that I made to use to illustrate the essay. It's the church sniper meme for people who've seen that. There's the guy who's standing there. There's the person standing behind him with the gun.
Oh, right, that one. Yeah.
And there's the guy up in the balcony, with the sniper rifle, and it represents. Answer that question in just a moment. It represents this series of philosophers criticizing each other for not having sufficiently deep and thoroughgoing critiques of inequality. So it's the first assassin is Rawls, the second, so it's the guy at the front who all the guns are pointed at, says meritocratic defenses of capitalist inequalities. The first shooter is Rawls, the second shooter is Cohen, and then it's Christine Sipnowich up in the balcony with the sniper rifle, shooting Cohen. So yeah, I actually think that was a really interesting discussion. So it might be that, it might be this more metaphysicsy thing, essentially about Heidegger. So we will have to just figure that out. But I did see in the chat question that was displayed on the screen was when the Marx Proudhon class starts. So technically it started today, but if you want to sign up for it now, I will certainly post the recording from today's session. And also I will say that what we read for today is the introduction to Proudhon's philosophy of poverty, which is this very strange, very frankly, parts of it read like the parody of something a French intellectual would write, that's like, I want to start out by saying that there's a God, by which I actually mean there isn't a God, but then
by which I mean I'll fuck your wife, haha.
yeah, exactly. And so, like, really, as far as his main concern about political economy, that really starts in chapter 1, which is what we're reading for next week. So I think that's a perfectly good place to join the class. If you want to do so, that's patreon.com/Ben Burgess. And again, the recording from that first session will be, and again, I think next Sunday is a good time to join. You want to read the essay we've been talking about, that's at benburgess.substack.com.
Cool. I will press the outro button. Bye, everyone.